Welcome everyone to Starclass. My name is Limbic, and here in Lesson 1 I would like to discuss the very basics of Starcraft 2. This video is aimed for people who either just got started into the game or who are looking to get into the game but have no idea what is going on. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So what even is Starcraft 2? What is this game even about? Well, put simply, it's a game where two players are pitted against each other, and each of these players starts with next to nothing, and their goal is to build themselves an army and use that army to defeat their opponent. There's a couple important things to note here. Most specifically is that no matter who you are, the tools and resources you have available to you are exactly equal to everyone else's. So if, let's say, right after watching this video, you decided you wanted to get into StarCraft and you bought the game, your units and your structures would be exactly the same as the best players in the world. They don't start with any additional stuff. Their units don't do any more damage or have any more health because they've been playing this game for years. The only difference between you and these astounding players is skill. And it is this difference that has made StarCraft 2 into what we call an esport, which is something that a video game that people watch as if it were any other sport. And it's something that players can make a living by doing. Yes, there are people who play StarCraft 2 as a living. That is their job. People want to watch these astounding players who have really dedicated themselves, who are practicing many hours a day in order to either pick up some tips by watching them in order to improve their own play, or to just appreciate the greatness and say, wow, look at what that pro player did, that's something I could never do, or some combination of those two. So with that basic premise out of the way, let's go ahead and explain the game in further detail. Probably the most pressing question is, how do you actually win a game of StarCraft 2? I mentioned before that you build up an army and try to use that to destroy your opponent. Going into a little more detail, the only way to actually win a game of StarCraft is to either destroy all of your opponent's buildings or be the only person left in the game. In other words, or having your opponent surrender. 99.9% I'd say of games of StarCraft actually end in one player surrendering. And the reason for this is the game will usually get to a point where one player realizes, okay, that's it, there's no way I can possibly win this game anymore, and forcing my opponent to just kill all of my buildings would be a waste of both of our times. I'm just going to go ahead and surrender so that we can both move on to the next game. So that's how a game of StarCraft is either won or lost. Now you might be thinking, hey Limbic, you said that no matter who you are, you start with the same stuff at the beginning of a game, but I've been watching some games, and I've noticed that sometimes people start with what looks like a bunch of humans in these little mechanical suits. Sometimes people start with a giant pyramid in the middle of the screen. What's going on with that? And the answer to that is there are three different races in StarCraft. There's the Terran race, which is the humans with advanced technology. There is the Protoss race, which is a race of dying out aliens. And there's the Zerg race, which is a highly evolved, rapidly mutating race of insectoid-like creatures. Now, these are three options that each player has to select from before starting a game. And they all work very differently. However, they are supposed to be balanced with each other. And they are actually balanced pretty well. Despite what some people may tell you, some complainers, StarCraft 2 is a very well-balanced game. We almost always see all three races represented relatively equally at the top levels of play. Sure, there may be periods where one race is dominating a little over the other two, but it's never been so bad that like all the pro players switch to one race because that's the only race that has even a chance, and if you play either of the other two, then you're just going to get stomped and have no chance at the prize money whatsoever. So the game is balanced asymmetrically, but they are balanced. All three races are equal in power. The last thing I would like to do in this video is I'm actually going to hop into a game of StarCraft and just explain to you the user interface, what's going on the screen, what all the numbers are, etc. So here we are in a game of StarCraft, and we are playing as the Terran race, which is the human-like race. Now, no matter which race you select, before starting a game of StarCraft, you will always start with one big building in the center of your screen and 6 workers. Now, this building will look different and it will be called something different depending on which race you picked, but they will all serve the same general functions, which is they will create new workers and they will be the place where workers will bring resources that they have gathered. So let's go ahead and demonstrate building a new worker here. So we'll just go ahead and click the train SCV. You can see that now this blue progress bar is filling up. This means that this building is working on something, and that once this progress bar has completely filled up, whatever it's building will have finished. So you can see our SCV finished building there, and he's going to start also harvesting resources and bringing them back to the command center. So let's talk about workers for a little bit. Workers are the unsung heroes of every single game of StarCraft. The reason being is that in order to do anything really, you require money. And minerals and gas, which we'll talk about in a bit, are the currencies of the game. You use them to build buildings, to train units, to research upgrades, to do pretty much anything. Now, if you have more workers, that means that you are going to be making more money. So if let's say I have twice as many workers as my opponent, that means I'm going to be making twice as much money, which in turn means that I can build an army twice as big. So it's generally a very good idea for somebody to build as many workers as they possibly can. And indeed, losing workers, having them die, is not a very good thing, as you might imagine. You want to build as many as you can, keep them alive, that way once they've harvested enough resources you can build a giant army and then just destroy an opponent who has less workers. Alright, at this time I would like to draw your attention to the upper right hand corner of the screen where I am selecting right now. There are 3 sets of numbers. The first one is your mineral count, next to this blue crystal thing here. This is how many minerals you currently have in your bank. So as you can see, as our SCVs here are harvesting the blue crystals here, the minerals, and bringing them back to our command center, this number is increasing. We use these minerals to build things like the refinery. So let's actually get that on the way while we talk about what this number is. This is Vespene gas. So similar to minerals, you need Vespene gas to build various things. Some things cost only minerals, but most things in the game cost a varying amount of both minerals and Vespene gas. So in order to harvest Vespene gas from these Vespene geysers, which I'm selecting right now, you must first build a structure. It's called something different for each race. For a Terran, it's called the refinery. And once you have it constructed, then you can put workers into here, and they will start harvesting Vespene gas exactly like they harvest minerals. And you can see now we have our Vespene gas count increasing. This third set of numbers is our supply count. So 11 of 11, what does that mean? Well, this first 11, the one to the left of the dash, is how much supply we are currently using. And the 11 to the right is how much supply we currently have. So this means that we are currently using all of the supply that we have, which is a problem because all living units in the game cost supply. So let's just try to build another SCV here. The adjutant will tell us. That means that we do not currently have enough supply. So how do we resolve this? Well, we select an SCV, the workers that construct the buildings, and we start constructing a supply depot. These will increase your supply, again, called something different for each race, but generally serve the same purpose. You need these in order to continue to building units. Right now I am what we call supply blocked, which is very bad. The reason being is, until we have the supply depot completely built, I cannot build anything. Now, an opponent who is not supply blocked that entire time can be building units for the entire duration of that supply block. Does that make sense? So every time I get supply blocked, that's time spent not building units. I can't be building workers, I can't be building armor units, I can't really be doing much of anything. So if you're ever watching a professional game and you hear the casters say, oh, supply block, now you know what that means. It's generally in your best interests to avoid a supply block whenever possible. Okay, so now let's talk about expanding. What does that even mean? Well, if you look on the map of any map of StarCraft, you'll see there are lots of locations that look pretty similar to where we started. There's tons of minerals, there's a pair of Vespene geysers. So how do we take advantage of that? Well, if we send a worker down to just harvest from one of these mineral fields down here, you will see that they had to travel all the way down, harvest the minerals, and then they would have to travel all the way back up to your town hall. And that yields exactly the same number of minerals as it would for just a trip between this mineral patch and the command center. There is a way to alleviate this, though. We can actually build more command centers, and no matter what race you are, you can build more of the basic structures that you started with. So once this command center is actually completed, instead of workers having to come all the way down to harvest from here and then come all the way back up here to return it, they'll just harvest here and then return it here. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's actually just cut that out. So similarly to how the more workers you have, the more money you're going to make, the more bases you have, so the more of these, sets of minerals and Vespene geysers that you have taken under your control, the more money you're also going to make. We could theoretically just build an infinite number of workers and have them mine from here, but that's actually inefficient because once you get to a certain point, workers become obsolete when working at the same base. That's why you want to expand to additional locations so that you can start pulling in even more money. And as we talked about before, the more money you make, the bigger of an army you can create, and generally the player with the bigger army wins. So right now you can see we're at 17 of 19 supply. I'm going to start another supply depot now instead of when we're at 19 of 19 supply. Now our supply count actually just increased there because command centers also count as supply depots basically, and since it finished, it shot up our supply. Alright, so that's it for the very basics of the game. In the next video, I'm going to go into much more depth about each of the individual units and the differences between each of the individual races, so keep an eye out for that. Make sure that if you have any questions to leave them in the comment section below and I will be sure to answer them. My name has been Limbic, thank you very much for watching and I will see you all next time. And then there's the Zerg race, which is a highly evolved, rapidly mutating set of insectoid-like creatures. What on earth is an insectoid?